What if I told you that the man ordering a $7 latte with his Apple Watch is actually poorer than the mechanic covered in grease fixing his truck? You see the Patagonia vest and the $200,000 tech salary, and you see success. You see the dirty coveralls and the modest paycheck, and you see struggle, but you would be dead wrong. You are falling for the rich-poor trap, a beautifully constructed illusion designed to keep high earners broke, while the quiet accumulators build empires in the shadows. I'm king, and I am a wealth architect. Here is the cold truth. I don't care what you make, I care what you keep. Today, I am going to deconstruct the math that makes a Silicon Valley engineer a high-income slave and a Texas mechanic a high-net-worth sovereign. This isn't a pep talk, it's a manual for financial survival. So before we expose the system that wants to bleed you dry, hit that subscribe button and like this video. The algorithm wants you to be a consumer. Hitting that button is your first act of rebellion. Now, let's get into the logic, and we're going to start with the math because numbers don't have feelings and they don't lie. We need to perform a financial autopsy on engineer Alex's $200,000 salary. People see that number and they think, wow, 6 figures, he's rich. But the IRS sees that number and they see a feast. First, we have the federal income tax. At $200,000, Alex is hitting a marginal tax rate that is aggressive. Then, because he lives in California, he gets hit with one of the highest state income taxes in the country, roughly 9.3% or higher depending on his total compensation. Then comes FICA, Social Security, and Medicare. By the time the government is done taking its pound of flesh, Alex's $200,000 has shriveled down to about $135,000 in take-home pay. That's roughly $11,000 a month. Now, that still sounds like a lot until you try to live in San Francisco. Alex wants to live near the office, so he rents a one-bedroom apartment in a luxury high-rise in Soma or Hayes Valley. That's $4,500 a month easily. Now, his $11,000 is down to $6,500. He has a Tesla Model 3 because everyone in his circle does. Between the lease payment, the insurance in a high-crime area, and the charging costs, he's out another $1,000. Now we're at $5,500. Then comes the cost of being a high-status professional in a blue state. The groceries at Whole Foods, the $3 an ounce organic kale, the $100 dinners with coworkers, the gym membership that costs $300 a month because it has eucalyptus towels. By the time Alex pays for his basic existence and maintains his social standing, he is lucky if he has $1,500 left at the end of the month to invest. His savings rate is less than 10%. He is one layoff away from total disaster. He is what we call a Henry high earner, not rich yet. And at this rate, he will never be rich. Now let's look at mechanic Jim in Texas. Jim makes $80,000. On paper, that's 60% less than Alex. But Jim lives in a state with 0% state income tax. That's an immediate 10% raise compared to Alex. His federal tax burden is lower because he's in a lower bracket, and because he owns his shop, he has an LLC. This is the secret weapon. Jim doesn't just earn money, he manages a business. His Ford F-150, that's a business expense. Section 179 deduction. His cell phone, business expense. A portion of his travel, business expense. Jim's taxable income is actually much lower than $80,000 because he understands the tax code is written for business owners, not employees. Jim's take-home pay is remarkably close to Alex's after you account for the lack of state tax and his deductions. But here is where the gap becomes a canyon, the cost of living. Jim owns a 4-bedroom house on a half-acre of land. His mortgage, including taxes and insurance, is $1,800 a month. Alex pays 2.5 times that for a shoebox with a view of a construction site. Jim's gas is cheaper, his groceries are cheaper, and his social life consists of backyard barbecues and high school football games, not $400 omakase dinners. Jim is able to save and invest $3,000 a month. His savings rate is nearly 40%. While Alex is struggling to fund his 401k to the match, Jim is buying a small rental property every 2 years. To understand why this is happening, you have to visualize the Federal Reserve's data on American wealth using my floor 217 analogy. Imagine a skyscraper with 217 floors. Each floor represents a level of net worth in America. Floor 1 is the median American family with about $70,000 in total assets. Floor 217 represents the top 1%, where you need at least $21.7 million to enter. And most people think that by getting a high salary job like Alex's, they are automatically moving up the floors. But salary is not an elevator, it's just the energy you use to climb the stairs. If your expenses are so heavy that you can't lift your feet, you stay on the bottom floors no matter how fast you think you're running. Alex is on floor 5, but he's exhausted. Jim is on floor 20, and he's still got plenty of oxygen. The reason the system is rigged against Alex is because of lifestyle creep and the status tax. In high cost of living cities, you aren't just paying for housing, you are paying a premium to live in a bubble of luxury consumption. Every person Alex knows is spending like a millionaire on a $100,000 budget. This creates a psychological feedback loop. If Alex doesn't go on the skiing trip to Tahoe or the summer trip to Italy, he feels like a failure. He is trapped in a race where the finish line keeps moving further away every time he gets a raise. Let's talk about the emotional weight of these two lives, because this is where the real tragedy happens. I want you to feel the Sunday scaries that Alex feels. It's 8 p.m. on a Sunday in a sleek, glass-walled apartment. Alex is looking out at the city lights, but he's not feeling inspired. He's feeling a cold, gnawing anxiety in the pit of his stomach. Why? Because he just checked his bank account. Despite making $200,000, he feels broke. He's thinking about the upcoming performance review. He's thinking about the rumors of another round of layoffs. He knows that if he loses his job, he has maybe 3 months of runway before he can't afford his rent. He is a high-level servant in a digital plantation. He has no autonomy. He has to attend meetings he hates, work on features he doesn't care about, and navigate office politics that are soul-crushing. He is wearing the golden handcuffs. They are shiny, they are made of 24-karat gold, but they are still handcuffs. He can't quit, he can't take a year off to find himself, he can't even afford to get sick. He is a prisoner of his own income. He looks successful on Instagram, but in the dark of his bedroom, he feels like a fraud. He's wondering, when does it get easier? I did everything right. I went to a top school. I got the big tech job. I make the big money. So why am I so stressed about a $400 car repair? Contrast that with Jim. Jim wakes up at 6 a.m. He's tired, sure, but it's a physical tired, not a soul-weary tired. He walks out onto his porch with a cup of black coffee that cost him 10 cents to brew. He looks at his yard. He owns this. He looks at his shop down the road. He owns that too. Jim doesn't have a boss. If a customer is a jerk, Jim can tell them to take their business elsewhere. He has what we call FU money. Not because he has $1 billion, but because his expenses are so low and his assets are so stable that he doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. When the tech bubble bursts and the engineers in San Francisco are panicking, people in Texas still need their brakes fixed. Jim's business is recession-proof, it's tangible, it's real. There is a deep, primal satisfaction in Jim's life that Alex will never understand as long as he's chasing likes and status. Jim has community. He knows the guy at the hardware store. He knows the sheriff. He knows his neighbors. They don't care about his total compensation or his stock options. They care about his character. This emotional stability is the ultimate luxury. True wealth is the ability to ignore the things that don't matter so you can focus on the things that do. Alex is focused on the shadow of wealth, the image, the clothes, the zip code. Jim is focused on the substance of wealth, the time, the land, the freedom. I knew a guy like Alex. Let's call him Mark. Mark was making $300,000 a year at a hedge fund in Manhattan. He was the king of the world in his 20s. He had the penthouse, the models, the bottle service, but Mark had a secret. He was $500,000 in debt. He had student loans from his MBA, a massive car loan for a Lamborghini he couldn't afford, and credit card debt from trying to keep up with the partners at the firm. One day the market turned. The fund took a hit. Mark was let go with 2 weeks severance. Within 6 months, he had lost everything. The penthouse was gone. The car was repoed. The friends who drank his champagne disappeared. Mark had to move back into his parents' basement at 35 years old. He had been a high earner, but he had zero wealth. On the other side, I know a guy like Jim named Dave. Dave never made more than $60,000 a year in his life. He worked as a janitor for a school district in a small town, but Dave was a master of the boring wealth strategy. He lived in the same modest house for 40 years. He drove used Toyotas, but every single month for 40 years he put $300 into an S&P 500 index fund. He never checked the price, he never panicked, he never sold. When Dave retired at 65, he had over $2 million in his account. A janitor retired a multimillionaire while the hedge fund guy ended up broke. That is the power of the math, and that is the tragedy of the emotion. So, how do you escape? How do you make sure you aren't the engineer crying in his Tesla? You need a tactical plan to dismantle the rich-poor trap. Strategy number 1 is geographical arbitrage. This is the single fastest way to build wealth in the 21st century. If you are a high earner, you must decouple your income from your location. If you make $200,000 in San Francisco, you are middle class. If you make $200,000 working remotely from a suburb in Tennessee or Florida, you are royalty. You immediately save 30 to 40% on taxes and housing. That money doesn't go to a landlord or the government, it goes into your brokerage account. If your company requires you to be in the office, your goal should be to live like a ghost. Live in the cheapest, safest area you can find, even if it's a 30-minute commute. Do not buy the status car. Do not buy the status clothes. Your coworkers will judge you, and that is exactly what you want. You want them to think you're struggling while you are quietly buying up the assets they will eventually work for. Strategy number 2 is the 50% savings rule. Most financial advisors tell you to save 10 or 15%. That is advice for people who want to work until they are 65. If you want to be free, you must save 50% of your take-home pay. But King, that's impossible in this economy. No, it's not. It's just uncomfortable. It means no DoorDash. It means no new iPhone every year. It means your luxury is your freedom, not your stuff. If you can't save 50%, you have a spending problem or an income problem. Address it immediately. When you save 50%, every year you work buys you another year of freedom. If you save 10%, it takes you 9 years of work to buy 1 year of freedom. Do the math. Which life do you want? Strategy number 3 is asset over liability. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. Your house is a liability. Your car is a liability. Your subscription to HBO Max is a liability. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket while you sleep. Dividend stocks, rental properties, a small business, a digital product. Your goal is to accumulate assets until the income from those assets covers your basic living expenses. That is the definition of financial independence. Once Jim's rental houses pay him $3,000 a month, he doesn't need the auto shop anymore. He is free. Alex has no assets that produce income. He only has his labor. If he stops working, the money stops flowing. He is a high-performance engine with no fuel tank. Strategy number 4 is tax optimization. You must stop thinking like a W-2 employee and start thinking like a corporation. If you have a high-paying job, you need a side hustle. Why? Because a side hustle allows you to open a solo 401k or a SEP IRA, which have much higher contribution limits than a standard 401k. It allows you to deduct business expenses. If you're an engineer, consult on the side. If you're a teacher, sell lesson plans online. Use the legal tax loopholes that the wealthy use. Don't just pay your taxes and complain. Study the tax code or hire someone who has. The government provides incentives for people who provide housing, jobs, and energy. Align your investments with those incentives. And finally, strategy number 5 is the asymmetric bet. Most people are taught to be diversified and safe, but safe is how you stay average. Dave got rich by being safe. But if you want to speed up the process and join the top 1% faster, you allocate 5 to 10% of your portfolio to asymmetric bets. Keep the foundation boring like Dave, but keep the upside aggressive like a venture capitalist. To break out of the middle class and into the top 1%, you need to take calculated asymmetric risks. These are bets where the downside is limited, but the upside is infinite. This could be investing 10% of your net worth into a high-growth startup, or buying Bitcoin in 2015, or starting your own business while you still have a day job. You don't need to win every time. You only need to win once. One asymmetric win can do more for your wealth than 30 years of saving pennies. But you can only take these bets if you have a solid foundation. You can't gamble with your rent money. That's why the first 4 strategies are so important. They give you the base that allows you to swing for the fences. Let's wrap this up with a final reality check. The world is changing. The standard path of go to school, get a job, buy a house, and retire at 65 is broken. Inflation is eating your savings, taxes are rising to pay for a mountain of national debt. Artificial intelligence is coming for the high-paying white-collar jobs. If you are relying on your salary to keep you safe, you are standing on a sandcastle while the tide is coming in. You need to stop being impressed by big numbers and start being impressed by big margins. A man who makes $50,000 and keeps $20,000 is wealthier than a man who makes $500,000 and keeps nothing. Wealth is not a number, it's a ratio. It's the ratio of your passive income to your expenses. It's the ratio of your freedom to your obligations. Don't let the shiny lights of the big city blind you. Don't let the pressure to be someone turn you into a slave. Be like Jim, be quiet, be disciplined, be a business owner. Build your empire in the suburbs, in the small towns, in the index funds, and in the cash-flowing assets. When the next economic crisis hits, and it will, you don't want to be the guy panicking because your luxury lifestyle is collapsing. You want to be the guy sitting on his porch, sipping a cheap cup of coffee, watching the sunset over a property that you own free and clear. That is the American dream. Everything else is just marketing. Remember, the system is designed to keep you productive and broke. It wants you to earn a lot so you can be taxed a lot and spend a lot. It wants you to be a good consumer. Break the cycle. Choose freedom over status. Choose wealth over income. Choose to be the king of your own life, not a pawn in someone else's game. If this video opened your eyes, if it made you a little uncomfortable, then I've done my job. Now it's your turn to do yours. Take one of the strategies I gave you and implement it today. Not next week, not after your next raise, today. Comment the word freedom below if you are choosing the path of the quiet millionaire, or comment status if you're still trying to convince yourself that the $200,000 trap is worth it. I read every comment and I want to know who is ready to climb to floor 217 the right way. I'm King, I'm a wealth architect, and I'll see you at the top where the air is clear and the handcuffs are gone. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who is currently drowning in the rich-poor trap. You might just save their life. Peace. Bye.